Hey there, Amplifiers. Thanks for tuning in. And today we have an amazing guest who I'm really excited because I've read his book and it's an awesome book. And if you're all about getting things done, being more efficient and effective, this is an important part of the process. See, too often workers spend time reacting to the crisis of the day, ticking off unimportant items on the to-do list. But you can follow a process that will help you schedule your priorities so that you're not just getting things done, you're making real progress towards what's most important to you. My guest today is the founder and CEO of Becoming Your Best Global Leadership. And he has authored the book, Do What Matters Most, Lead with a Vision, Manage with a Plan, Prioritize Your Time. See it in the background here. And I'd like to welcome to Growth Amplifiers, Mr. Steve Shallenberger. Steve, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. And it is a delight to be with Kenny Harper, the legend, and he is blessing so many people. So it's an honor and a privilege to be with you. Congratulations on what you're doing and the what you're providing to your listeners, because it's so valuable and so needed. So great going, Kenny. It's terrific to be with you today.
It's a terrific thing to have you here as well. So I'm really glad you're here. I know you're one of the cool things that I was just mentioning before we went on air is that you actually have the wonderful blessing and opportunity to collaborate with your son on these projects. And you've really had a great career helping coach hundreds of companies around the world. Could you just give us just a little bit of background of kind of how you got to where you're at today?
Okay, great question, Kenny. And somehow, I'm not sure how it happened, but I imagine it's probably because of having mentors in my life. And early on at a young age, 16, I had a great mentor, Dave Conger, in the San Francisco Bay Area that really got me thinking about business, saying, I want to be a businessman. And my grandpa introduced him to me at, as I said, at a young age. And so, you just can never a friend of mine, Dieter Uchtdorf, once said, never overestimate your importance and never underestimate your influence. And I love my grandpa, Amos Shallenberger, because, here's this guy, just a cool guy. He makes a simple introduction and it changed my life. And through Dave Conger, he'd been a bomber pilot in Europe during World War II, and he brought all these habits with him. He was a real estate broker in the Bay Area, had 6 different offices, and so he helped me start my first company, which was a maintenance company. And I would put up signs for the real estate company, clean out properties when people were, they had a changeover, they might have been evicted or ended their rent. Well, I'd go in and restore these places. And that's how I got my love for business. And one day, Mr. Conger said, I want you to come to my house and help me with some chores. And I said, great. It was a Saturday and I pulled up over the hill, like I'm just a young guy, right? Mm-hmm. And sitting in the driveway were 2 new Cadillacs. And the license plates, Kenny, said Conger 1 and Conger 2. And I thought, whoo, I didn't even know this stuff existed. I want that. And with time, learned to balance the desire to be successful in business with also making a difference in life and doing good and service. And I learned that too from him. Well, I really started my first, after going to college, my first company at 26 was a marketing firm. And at 27, bought my first company, which was a publishing and printing firm. And within a few years, we had 700 employees and we're off to the races. Wow. And so it's interesting, Kenny, the next crossroads that happened. And I know that you have a lot of entrepreneurs and people making a difference that are listening in today, as well as other friends and guests that you have. But as I look back early in my career, one of the really important things that I did was invited mentors into my life that could help. That was a big deal. So my college professor was Stephen Covey,
Wow.
and so I invited him to be on my board, for which he was for 17 years. And then I joined his board for 5 years, and then took over one of his international groups. And these mentors, that they can accelerate your learning so quickly. And then I had another really terrific businessman, and oh man, they were an inspiration and had a big impact. And so I got into leadership, I'm sure because of Stephen, a lot early on. And these employees would come to me and say, how can I be a top sales rep, or how can I be a top manager? And I would share a few things, Kenny, that I thought were helpful, but I knew there was a lot I didn't know. I was young, for heaven's sakes. And so I really started research that I thought would take a few years. It ended up taking over 40 years. And I interviewed over 150 CEOs throughout the world, and studied the lives of hundreds of individuals that have changed the world for good. And what I was looking for is what set apart high-performing individuals and high-performing teams from everybody else. And here's what we discovered. We discovered that none of these leaders were perfect, but we saw over and over 12 things that they did that created the excellence. And these were principles. They were timeless. They were universal, in that anybody could learn them. And as they mastered them, they would get the same result. And so that's really how we got started. And we were blessed, my wife and I, with 5 boys, and finally had a girl. So yeah, 5 boys in a row.
and then finally had the girl. Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, Queen Anne.
Oh, yes, I could see how that could definitely happen.
2 of the boys ended up becoming fighter pilots, F-16 pilots and Air Force officers. And another one almost, but got ulcerative colitis while he was at the Air Force Academy. Another really fun guy. And so when the oldest, Rob, was getting ready to get out of the Air Force, we decided this was the time to really launch our leadership company. And that's how we got going. And so Kenny, what we found is that we took these 12 things and put them into our first book, Becoming Your Best, the 12 Principles of Highly Successful Leaders. And that really became the content, the foundation of a blessing of being able to teach these principles all over the world. To large companies, small companies, we found they got the same result. And over the last 7 or 8 years since McGraw-Hill published this book, we found that 3 of those principles particularly had to do with high performance. So some of the, some of those principles, for example, had to do with living in peace and balance, or one that you, I know, are a strong believer in, which is never giving up, right? So some of these things you would see over and over, but 3 of them led to high performance specifically. And the 3 principles were: lead with a vision. Every one of these highly successful leaders, when they took over in their responsibilities, just like you do, you have a vision. And when you work with a client, you set a vision. It's what highly successful leaders do. But that alone is not sufficient. So they also manage with a plan. And these are the principles. So in other words, they have a plan to realize that vision. The vision's inspiring. And then third is they know how to prioritize their time really well. So those were the 3 principles. And what we found is that there were 3 habits associated with those 3 principles. And that's what the book, Do What Matters Most, is all about. It teaches the why of the 3 principles and the how. So how do you develop a personal vision, right? How do you set highly effective annual goals, and how do you execute on those day in and day out to do what matters most? So that's kind of a long answer to your question of how we got going, but that's what's brought us here. And Do What Matters Most, which was launched by Barrett Kohler Publishing, we're being very fortunate because it's we're having a great response. I mean, hearing a lot back from people is saying, thank you. This is like changing my life. I'm finally getting out of the rat race and figuring out how to consistently do what matters most.
So I've read through this, and I've actually worked through the exercises. And one thing I'll say I really like about it, which I see is available on Amazon and other bookstores as well, is it gives you the reason why this is important, and then it gives you instruction for how to apply it, along with exercises at the end of each chapter, which I think it really should be part of more business books. Sometimes there's a lot of great stories, a lot of good information, but as you know, it's not what you know, it's the actions and application that really has the transformation. And that's one of the things that I've seen kind of sink a lot of ships and prevent a lot of people from amplifying their business is maybe they know things, but they take that for granted, right? Oh, I've heard set goals. I know how to set goals. Oh, I know how to prioritize. But there's a difference between just doing the basics and then doing something really effectively. And if you skip steps and you're not putting in all the ingredients, you're not going to get the same result. So as you're sharing this, if you wouldn't mind just sharing, how do you combat some of the people that may kind of look at, oh yeah, setting goals, vision, I kind of already know that. How do you help people to see things at a different perspective?
Yeah, and I might just pause for a second and say that's one of the things you do so great, Kenny, is you teach businesses how to do it. How do they set the strategy? How can they increase their brand awareness? Well, this is doing the same thing in terms of personal and organizational effectiveness. And so first of all, I'd say if you have somebody that says, I've got it down, they're in deep trouble.
Right?
Yeah, right. Because one of the things I discovered in this research that I've done all over the world is highly successful leaders are humble. They're humble about knowledge. And their mindset is they realize they don't know it all. They can learn till their last breath in life. And it is this drive of becoming your best, of how do I, and we need it in today's world. There's far too many things changing too quickly to think you've got it. And so it's the mindset of saying, man, I need to pay attention here and I need to keep learning. And that is what allows you to be among the best. Now, specifically on this question that you're bringing it up, this is scientific and research based. And so what we've done, not only the research, Kenny, of what to do and how to do it effectively, but how many are doing it. So if I'm in a room with of CEOs, 100 CEOs, and I ask the question, how many of you have a written personal vision that you regularly review? One or two hands go up. Like the first time I started doing this, I was in shock. And it's because it's just not typically taught. But once you get it down in writing, it changes everything. You see everything differently. And so, like you mentioned in the book, it not only says, here's the why, but here's the how to do it. And so as you actually go through writing this by each role, now you have a new set of thoughts. And so then the real question is, okay, how do I convert that into action, which ultimately allows you to consistently do what matters most. And when you're doing what matters most in balance, meaning in your personal life, fitness, health, emotional strength, then you have the capacity to have stronger relationships. And when you have stronger relationships, you're happier, more successful, higher trust. And when you have those, it helps you be more effective, happier, healthy, and more prosperous in your professional life. So they're kind of all tied together. One of my favorite quotes is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It goes like this: sow a thought and you reap an action. Sow an act and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character, and sow a character and you reap a destiny. So, but where does it all start?
Right.
Right there with the thoughts that you have. And that is why having a personal vision is so important. A person once said, you will either lead a life by design or live a life by default. This is helping you live a life by design, by what's in your heart, what inspires you. And now you get it down, you say, that's where I'm going. And now you say, okay, now how do I put that into action? And that is where the second habit of having SMART annual goals comes in. And one of the things, Kenny, is it's changing the lens of how you see things. And it's not just doing it on a general basis, which is not always the most effective. Mm-hmm. It's doing it specifically by your roles in life. And when you break it down, this is simple stuff, right? All of a sudden, you now start seeing life in balance, but it's excellence at every level of your life. And so you say, okay, this body I have, this mind, the soul is the most important thing I have in life. So I need to take care of it. So what am I going to do in 2021 to be at the very best I can be? And what does my vision look like? The vision is I'm fit and healthy. Okay, right. What do I need to do to make it happen this year? You know, it's regular exercise, whatever it is, you know, blah, blah, blah. Well, you do this for each role. And that's what ultimately leads then to this third one, which is how do I execute on doing what matters most? And we have there you go. Look at that man go. I'm telling you, man, that Kenny, he's all over it.
This is really cool. They really have some great demonstrations in the actual book of not just, this is some things I need to do, but how to plan and be effective with it. Because what I tend to see a lot is, like I mentioned earlier, some people think, I kind of already know this. So they don't bother applying it. But you've got to continue to keep focused. And by writing things down and looking at it on a regular basis with your plan, you make sure that you're taking consistent action forward towards your goals. And with the exercises in the book, they guide you through the process of how to do this. And I'm familiar with goal setting and creating action plans, but I did pick up some different strategies and some helpful tips that I hadn't thought of before, just from reading through this book and looking at the examples. So I like what you said earlier. Some of the most successful people know that there's always room for improvement. As soon as you get in the mindset, I already know this, I've got it all, you go back into being a teenager. I know it, Dad. No, no. That's how we let our guard down. You can always improve. And we've got to make sure that we're looking at great resources to make sure that we continue sharpening the saw and getting those results. So I've got another question for you, Steve, I really appreciate you having your time here. What are the two biggest habits? Which one of the ones do you think would be the most impactful in someone's life out of the three habits? What would you say is your favorite and would have the biggest impact in someone's life?
I would probably say it's the third one, which is pre-week planning, because it presupposes that you do have a vision. It presupposes that you have identified this year, and you do it every year afterwards, what your main goals are by role. Because now you have a perspective each week, and Kenny is all over it. Like, he held that up, and way to go. It's a simple process, as you can see, but it's taken a few minutes during the weekend, say sometime from Friday around 4:00, but definitely before Monday. And just think about your new week coming up. It's a fresh week. And this sheet that Kenny held up is scientifically designed to help you focus, to create balance in your life, excellence, and to consistently do what matters most. And it's simple. Here's all you do. You write down your roles at the top of the sheet. There's a space to do it. And then you simply reflect. By that role, what's the very most important thing I should be doing this week to be great? It's in harmony with my vision that creates excellence. And because, for example, nobody else can do what Kenny is doing as his podcast host. He's the man.
Oh, thank you.
Or as the CEO of his business. And so he's thinking, what are the things that matter most that I can really do this great this week to move my business along, to move my personal life? And each of us have our own roles, and we recommend 5 to 7. And then you put in any calendar dates you have, and there's a place to put it in the calendar. And now you balance that week out. And people say, well, how long does that take? Well, it only takes 20 or 30 minutes. And if you think about 20 or 30 minutes in the scope of a whole week, it's 1% or less of your time. Yet this will have an impact on the other 99% in a huge way. Can I give one example, Kenny? Would that be okay?
I would love that. I just wanted to add in the thought as you give that example that I had, that it was a little bit of a paradigm shift. So I don't know where exactly I heard it, but there was you'll have more things on your to-do list than you can ever get done. So it's people just try to like, I'll get to my important things once I get these priorities off these to-dos done, but it's a never-ending list. So you've got to put first things first, put on your mask so that you can help other people who need their air. Put those things first. So I wanted to just share that, and I'd love to hear this example of how this really applies right here.
Okay, yeah, you're so spot on. I like Kenny, man. He's a fun guy. Be a fun guy to work together with. Well, I love this little comment. You're either going to schedule your priorities versus trying to prioritize your schedule. And there's a huge difference because, as Kenny points out, the to-do list is endless. And it can go from week in and week out, and it can drive your life. Not making key leadership decisions about what's most important. And so here's the example. A number of years ago, I was teaching a group of Pepsi executives. And this happened to be the 3rd largest distributor for Pepsi in the world. They had been in business for 123 years. And we are teaching exactly what we're talking about now, Kenny, which is pre-week planning. And we actually had the executives going through, put their roles down. Now, what matters most? This is the bullseye and the target, right? That's what you're going for. And if you can't see that bullseye, you're never going to hit it. And so it starts really making things crystal clear. And I noticed that this executive, under his role of father, put down, call my son. And so the next step is, when will you do it? And he had put in Wednesday night at 7. And I said, so why is that such a big deal? And he shared with me he had not talked with his son in 7 years. And I said, oh my goodness, what happened? He said, well, we were in an argument and we just haven't talked since. I said, well, that is something that matters most then. I said, I just recommend you put down his phone number right there at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. So now, before he's ever started the week, guess what? He's got his week sketched out by each role. And there's balance in it. You leave holes in your schedule because you know unplanned things will come up. And this is okay because you can move things around. Well, I was going to go back in 6 months and reteach this group, follow up with them, see how they were doing. I could not wait to go back and visit with this executive. And that's the first thing I did when I went back. I said, okay. I said, so how did it go? Did you call your son? He said, yes, I did. I said, so? He said, you're not going to believe it. He said, we could not even remember what the argument was about.
Oh, man.
I know. He said, this has changed my life because I talk with my son every week, multiple times during the week. He said, I'm a better executive. I'm happier. I feel more at peace. And he said, so it's changed me. He says, not only that, he said, I found out I had 2 grandchildren I didn't know about. And so here's my question, Kenny, and I think it's right to the point you just made before we got into this discussion and this example. And that is, why didn't this wonderful guy, this executive is a cool guy, by the way, why didn't he call his son in year 3 or year 5? And I've reflected upon that. And the answer is because we so often become a victim of the urgent and just going from one to-do list from one week to the next. And we never stop to think about what matters most. And the very moment that this wonderful fellow sat back and thought about his role as a father, he knew what he should do.
Right.
And although it didn't take very much time, it was what mattered most. And of course, it's these little things that can be so impactful in our life. And so this is a perfect example of scheduling your priorities, not prioritizing your schedule and just making that pretty.
I love that. We got a comment then from Manny Torres. Love that statement. Schedule your priorities versus prioritizing your schedule. Good stuff. Thank you for sharing, Manny. We also had a question come in. This was due to our pre-promotions. But the question was from an accountant named Jan, and she is basically saying she doesn't have time to knock out all her to-do list anyway, let alone add in additional time for planning. How can she begin taking new steps to plan and prioritize when she doesn't have the time to do what she already is trying to get done?
Okay, and what's her first name?
Her name's Jan.
Hey, Jan, way to go. That's a good question. And I graduated in accounting, so whoo-hoo!
Yay!
I have a fellow accountant here. Well, it's like the dog chasing the tail. You have to be a little careful here, because it's not till you stop and sit back and watch it and you say, this is ridiculous. What I want to do is get to a whole new level. And so it means that you have to operate at a new level of thinking. And so we had a CEO write to us about 4 months ago. I wish you could see the email. That he has 6,000 employees. There's a lot of employees.
It's a lot.
But this, I might add, this works whether you have one employee, you're managing yourself, or a large organization. But he reported that he said, I've applied this now for the last 3 weeks, and I have never got more done in my entire career. It's because I've been thoughtful about the things that matter most, and that's what I work on getting done. But then I also look at my schedule and realize I need to exercise this leadership. So even though it's like sharpening the saw a little bit before you cut down the tree, that's exactly what's happening in pre-week planning. And so you take this time and you're really thoughtful, and you start seeing ways to leverage your time, how to do better, how to perhaps delegate or eliminate things that aren't important, and it starts freeing up time. You start realizing how to consistently exercise. When will you do it? And the energy that brings, the clarity of thinking that brings. And so they build on one another, Jan. I love your question, but the minute you start doing it, it's like any new habit, I might add. It does take practice. And I saw recently, sometimes people say, well, how long does it take to develop a new habit? And people say, well, 21 days or 6 weeks. Well, the answer is 62 to 65 times of doing something. That's what it takes to create a new neural pathway, 62 to 65 times. And if you do it in 21 days, you'll have a new habit. But it could take much longer. So that's why we recommend that you do pre-week planning for 52 weeks. It'll change your whole life forever. It doesn't take long, but it creates this new habit. I've now done it for like 35 to 38 years. And if I ever miss, and I rarely do, it is like night and day on the quality of my week. My peace, my stress levels are so much lower when I do it. I feel so much more confident and ready to go. So this little investment is huge, and you will inspire and be an example and lead everybody else because you learn how to do it. Well,
I'm inspired to connect with someone. I have two sons, and they are around 7 and 10. My business partner also has two sons around the same age, and we're seeing, we don't want to force them to do anything that doesn't fit their personal vision. But if there's a way we can collaborate with them and work with them in the future, that would be something great. And it's cool to know that you and Rob are really partnering together at becoming your best global leadership. And so I just wanted to thank you again for guesting and being able to share your inspiration from your career, but also actionable steps you could begin taking right now that could have an impact on your existing life and your future and those that you serve and care about. It means a lot. If you're tuning in, make sure to visit becomingyourbest.com. That is becomingyourbest.com to find more about this company, more about Steve and his business, and you can capture a copy of the book. Is there an easy way to order on the book, or do you need to go on a different site, Steven?
No, it's a piece of cake to go on Amazon, and they have good pricing, and just anywhere where you buy books.
So do what matters most, take action, right? Do what matters most, take inspired action. Steve, you've been a really great guest, wonderful inspiration, and you've dropped a lot of awesome knowledge bombs on us. As a parting thought, if you could share just one piece of information that you've gained on your journey thus far that might help others on their journey. It doesn't have to be related to your book, but if it is, that's fine too. But if you could share just one closing thought, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kenny. And once again, before we sign off, it's been a privilege to be with you and your listeners. I admire you. I know that your listeners are here because they're trying to become their best. They're learning and they're anxious to do better. So great going. Compliments to you and Kenny for having this resource of growth amplifiers there. It's awesome. I think that's a good question to end up with is at the end of everything, it's our relationships. It's taking time to do the golden rule, to look for kindnesses and look for good in people. I think as we do this, it brings the best out in other people. It brings out the best within ourselves, but it also helps us have a greater degree of happiness. So when you combine this respect and kindness and looking for good in other people with these other principles, it takes you to a whole new level. And so when your days are over, you look back and you say, you know what? I've got some really great friends and great family. And that's where the greatest joy and success comes from in life. So thanks again.
Thank you, Steve. Amplifiers, if you do have questions that pop up, feel free to chat them in. We'll try to get them over to Steve and get his feedback on those. As you know, we do record this show live, but we also post after the fact. And we want you to get your questions answered, to take action, and keep on amplifying. Thank you very much. To show your support, take a moment to amplify this message by sharing it online. To connect with me or gain more business growth insights, visit www.growthamplifiers.com. Thank you for your support.